This video is an introduction to the fundamentals of modelling using Maya. Now there are many different types of modelling that we can do, but I'm going to focus on some really basic stuff using polygons. So what do I mean when I say a polygon? Well, a polygon, I'm holding down my space bar so that I can go to the menu to create a polygon primitive. I'm going to create a polygon primitive torus. I'm just going to remind you about going into the options, which is the little box here, and you can set the parameters for your object here. Now, if I go to edit reset settings, it will take us back to the defaults, which we were at anyway, but I can change these parameters. So for example, the radius I can increase. Let's increase this. I can type these parameters in as well as use the sliders. So let's put a radius in at 5. And I'm just going to put, let's leave the axis. Note the axis divisions 20 by 20. The section radius is 5. Don't ignore twist for the time being. It's on the y-axis. So I'm going to create that. So we have this torus here. Okay, so the torus looking like a kind of donut, bagel shaped object. Now, if I click on the polytorus inputs, which is basically what we call the history of that object, you can see we are mirroring the parameters that I put in earlier. So if I was to put my section radius now, I can put that back to 1, which would be the default. I end up with an object like that. Just a reminder, I can either change these parameters here, or I can select the channel name. So there's the channel value, there's the channel name, and I can, if I have the channel name selected and I hover my cursor within my panel and middle mouse, you will see the cursor turns to horizontal arrows. I can also adjust those parameters there. Subdivisions means, okay, let's put 50 here. So if I increase the subdivisions, it increases the subdivisions on the axis this way, the axis being Y. I'm pressing W, so that it was on the y-axis, if you remember. That doesn't carry through to the history, by the way. The axis doesn't carry through. Subdivisions height means those values. So I can set my initial object up. I'm just going to put this back to that to 10, that to 50. Now, let's have a look at these quads. So this, at the moment, this object consists of quads. That means it's made up of faces that have 4 sides. Now, it's generally a good idea to try and get your quads as close to being square as possible, particularly if we're going to animate, because things will deform, bodies will deform more effectively if these quads have got relatively equal sized edges. So we have the subdivisions at 50, so the subdivisions height, the subdivisions axis really need to be a little bit more to push these towards being, it won't go above 50 by the way, so 50 is the max there, but I can type that in. So I'm going to try 80. So you can see now we're moving towards having more even sides. I'm going to put that to 100. That's not bad. And the subdivisions height I can adjust. So I'm going to move that so we're getting close to being squarish. Put that at 10. So we have fairly even edges, but the thing is now we've got a very kind of angular object. So I'm going to have to compromise if I want this to look quite smooth. Or I need to increase both of these values. I'm going to increase these until we get, so I'm compromising a little bit on the squares. That's not looking too bad. So got that 17, let's just get an even number, maybe 20. Now, suppose if I imagine that I'm going to be happy, by the way, let's look at what the twister does, in case you're wondering. That just rolls that around, and you will see it reaching a maximum of 360, minimum of 0. I'm going to, one more thing, oh yeah, section radius is the radius of the section, so let's put that at 3. Okay, supposing this is kind of the shape that I may be after. Once I'm happy with that, I can go to edit, delete by type history. Note that's Alt-Shift-D. So I can go Alt-Shift-D, delete by type history. The history is gone. Those parameters can no longer be adjusted. They have been deleted. And I'm just left with the transform node and the shape node, which is basically the geometry. Okay, so this is just a reminder of how we actually generate objects initially. So I haven't got this object. I'm going to look at it in a bit more detail. So this, the moment I'm in object mode, notice that there are 3 buttons next to each other. I'm just going to focus on these 2. This is hierarchy mode, which you don't need to think about now. This is object mode, this is component mode. Notice if I switch between object and component mode, then the colors change. So if in object mode my object is green, or if I have more than one object, some of the objects will be white. If I go to component mode, the edges are drawn as blue and the vertices are drawn as pink. Now I'm going to talk about these. There's other ways that you can arrive into the object and component mode as well. I can right hold and I can select face. Note that it doesn't switch up here, but I am still able to edit in component mode here. So I've selected faces, so as I hover around these faces I can select individual faces. If I right hold and go vertex, vertices are these points. I can hover and select individual verts, either a few of them or individual ones. Just if you look in your channel box, you can click, you see this option to click CVs, click to show. CVs just means control vertex, it's short for control vertex. That particular vertex has a number and a position. Now each vertex, it actually, they're all, the 0 refers to their relationship to themselves at creation. So although they're not all 0 in the origin, which is here, they are 0 in relation to themselves. If I start to move that, you can see that value changing. I'm not going to move anything around right now. So we have vertices, which is points. Just going to press F to go close to that vertex. And that vertex has a relationship with neighbouring verts. So this vertex has 1, 2, 3, 4 neighbours, which it would do because it's on the cross basically, which is forming edges around the faces. So this particular vertex has a relationship with its neighbours. If I select, so a vertex, 2 verts will, so 2 points in space, a vertex is a point, same thing. 2 points or 2 vertices, verts for short, will form a line between them. In fact, that line can extend to infinity in either direction. So two points in separate positions in a space will generate a line, which is in Maya and in 3D we tend to call an edge. So I can select edges now. There is an edge. So it's kind of almost like you've got points as being the most basic type of component. An edge is kind of one step up in evolution. as another type of component. And if you have two edges, which would be then determined by 3 points, two edges will actually determine a triangle. And in fact, all of these polygon objects are made of triangles. If I go to the attribute editor and I go to mesh component display, I can display triangles. So you will see that even though these are quads, they are actually consisting mathematically underneath, under the base appearance. These are made of triangles, hundreds or thousands or millions of triangles. So a quad is basically two triangles. We don't really want to keep that on. So two or more edges will define a face or a plane in mathematical terms. But in Maya we call points lines and planes, verts, edges, faces. Same thing, it's just a different names. So we have now this face. So we have points, so let's right hold. There are more options in this menu, but right now I'm just focusing on these three types of component: vertices, edges, and faces. So those three fundamental components are the main things we need to understand if we're going to start modeling in 3D packages such as Maya. Now I'm in component mode still, but if I want to come back to object mode, I could go object mode here, and I'm coming back to object mode. Okay, so just to be concise, I'm going to stop this video now. So this is kind of part one. This video is now long enough, I think, to bear one watching. So I will see you in the next video, which will continue from this point.